afternoon, brother. How's it going?
Pretty good.
And you got your nice 3M shirt on there. That's
Never worked there, but I like 3M. I used to live in Minnesota for a couple of years, so that's a really nice.
They're a great company.
Very nice.
I never lived in Minnesota like you, but I visited 3M one time. I actually got to go inside their plant, check things out, walk around and stuff, get the tour. Not really a tour, but we were doing some, looking into what some of the things they could do. But great capability there. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Anyway, we're not here to talk about 3M, but
no, we're not here to talk about
But since you had your shirt on, without give a plug for a good company, nice American company, I think. So what we are going to talk about today, instead, are the concept called like the 15-minute city, the town center concept, the sustainable communities or cities. These things are big buzzwords now in the climate change community. Have you heard those terms before?
Oh yeah, I've heard of most of them. The town center I wasn't really familiar with, but when I was doing research, I heard about the 15-minute cities and I know from the sustainable communities, that's from the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So that's been around since I think 2015 or sometime like that.
Yeah. That's about right. The 15-minute cities started off in Paris. I believe that they give it a credit to a Paris University professor who coined the term 15-minute city. And the whole purpose of the 15-minute city was to have everything that you need accessible within a 15-minute walk or bike ride or something like that. So it was a place where you could use less resources but still have good accessibility to all the things you need for life. So it sounds like a good concept, don't you think?
Oh yeah, it sounds very sustainable too.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you're saying. We'll talk about sustainable communities too, and what you just mentioned about the UN. So. But I read an article that our hometown is going to spend $365 million on developing our hometown into a 15-minute city. So
very good.
And all because of climate change. That was their purpose. Like, hey, we're trying to reach our 2030 goals, that the UN has established, and so we're trying to help our hometown be a community, a community where it's like a 15-minute concept. Which is kind of neat. Downtown, they're building all kinds of great complexes and housing and apartment complexes, all near where there's either transportation accessibility or great restaurants, shopping, and all that kind of stuff. They're trying to design this, as they renovate downtown, with places like that where people go, hey, this would be a cool place to live. Like I don't know if you. I think it's called the Stockyard or something, but downtown where there's these neat restaurants, it's all inside this compound, this fenced compound. And across the street, there's, a bunch of apartment complexes and they have light rail going through. And so, but it's not only that, you have to have other things in mind as well, because you need to have good infrastructure, like bike trails. Okay, if you don't have any bike trails, how are you going to get around? You're not a bike, right? So you have to, and walking areas and walking paths. So sometimes the 15-minute concept is done well, and sometimes it's not done so well. But some of the things I got to be careful of is like in Paris, where they started this. Paris is a pretty established city, and so it's just like some of the other big cities, like Washington D.C. and New York. But so they decided they needed to block off certain roads for just pedestrian traffic, and so. If you do that in an established form but don't think about the infrastructure to reroute the traffic, then you're just creating more traffic problems around the city and stuff. That was one of the complaints some of the Paris people had. And they didn't understand the roads they blocked off weren't roads that were heavily used in foot traffic anyways.
I was going to say there is a lady that kind of brought this concept of blocking off roads in the book. It's called Transition Engineer, and I can't remember the name of the lady. I think she's a professor in New Zealand. She advocated the idea that you could block off roads, like certain residential roads or roads that are like city roads, and put in places to where you can grow local food and stuff like that in those areas.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So like you would switch one for the other. It's less car traffic going through it, transportation, but you would establish these kind of food, local greenhouses or
Oh, that's good.
buildings where you're growing food.
That's important. I mean, they don't think about all the time. And you brought up a great point is that they just go, okay, let's do this. Let's block up these roads. We'll make them walk in, designate them, and then we'll, yeah, that'll be great for people. But they don't think about the consequences of that, and they don't think it through very well. But like, you need other things, other infrastructure in this 15-minute concept. And so as long as it's done right, I think it's a great thing. So we talk about bike paths. You need accessibility to medical facilities. You need, like you're saying, agriculture and, where people can actually grow their own food. That's hard to do in a 15-minute zone, so maybe you need to have established places like a greenhouse or something where people can actually go and do that within walking distance, Parks and recreation, public transportation, and even office space, where, okay, so people can either, if they're telecommuting or commuting from an office that's a satellite office, you maybe should have a satellite office within that area, or, if you're outside of that zone. But our town is spending all this money mainly on transportation infrastructure. So if they're going to block off some cities, streets, they're going to have to provide more alternate infrastructure for the traffic to go around. I think that's what they're trying to do also with this big plan. It hasn't been approved yet. It's still in the proposal phase right now. So if the town approves it, it'll do stuff like that, provide more public transportation, more infrastructure for rerouting traffic. And in addition to that, it's going to provide what they call micro transportation, more electric, plug-ins for vehicles, but also for one thing we do really well here is some of those you can rent those little electric bikes and scooters and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they're really easy to do. You just rent them, on an app, and you take off on this scooter and you go a few miles down the road with your friends or something in some restaurant or whatever, and you just leave it there. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, some guy picks them all up, all around town, because they all have, locator units in them, and puts them back into those hubs where people can rent them again the next day. So those kind of things are neat. They want more and more of that so that people can just go anywhere they want within this 15-minute zone, walking, biking, light rail, buses, and then these micro transportation rentals that you can do, which is kind of neat. So, well, it reminded me of what we call the town center concept. Have you heard of that before, the town center concept?
I didn't until you started talking about it. I've never heard it for as far as the community goes.
So it reminded me of the town center, because it's not, the town center concept started way before the 15-minute city concept started. One of the more famous ones is the Ruston Town Center near Washington, D.C. And so that was started back in the 80s, actually. And so it was funny. I have this personal story about that. Is when I was out in D.C. looking for a place to live, it's really expensive in Washington, D.C., right? You can't buy a place in close. Even if you go into Arlington or places like that, it's really expensive. And they said, hey, yeah, you should go check out Ruston area. And so I drove way on out to Ruston. And I was looking at these houses, and there's one nice house, had a nice yard, fenced yard and everything, and good single-family home. And they wanted $135,000 for it, right? This is back
wow, man,
that was back in the 1990 or something like that. And I said, man, I'm not going to pay $135,000 to drive all the way out to Ruston from work, because I was working in D.C. And it's like, and I regret that decision ever since then, because Ruston, what they did is they said, hey, we're building this town center. And what they did is it was kind of like the 15-minute city concept. It wasn't meant to be climate change oriented. It was meant to be convenient oriented, to where people would want to live in the city center area that's a suburb of some other place. So what they did is they designed it and they built it because it had a lot of room, to start from scratch. And they built it up so where, hey, that'd be kind of cool. We'll have a hospital nearby. We'll have all these great restaurants and shopping. We'll have parking for people to come in here. We'll have townhomes all around it. We'll have parks and recreation. It goes right where the bike trail is going through. That goes all the way to D.C., by the way. And we'll have metro rail there. We'll have metro stops and stuff. They had all these great things, And so people just like kind of like, oh, this is cool. This is the place to be, you know? So people started buying up, you know, property in Reston. And what happens to that when everybody wants to live there? Well, prices go way up. So I lost out on that real estate deal there.
That would have been a good thing.
But Ruston, they also the smart thing they did as well is because everybody wants to, you know, live in this area, you can walk and go and do anything you want to, but it's work. So everybody that was working in DC, it's like, oh, well, they still have to get into DC. So that was where the metro kind of came in. But another thing they did was smartly, they built office space there, right in the middle, these high rises. And so companies could lease space for their employees. So I guess that's my point, is that's the difference between a town center concept and a 15-minute concept, is that the town center concept was built on a situation where, hey, we're going to make a place where people really, really want to live. And then they don't have to like drive around. Everything they need is right around here. Well, that's like what a 15-minute concept is, but it's based on, you know, using less resources. But I think the both are very similar in that sense, in that if you take the 15-minute concept and you say, let's take a lesson learned from the town center concept so that we make it attractive for people to live there, then I think that could work also.
Yeah. Well, I also think that these town centers and 15-minute cities would work if they established the local agriculture in those areas. And I think that's going to be vital for places like this because, I mean, not only do we spend a lot of money transporting all that agriculture within the cities, but I think if people won't have to travel too far to get their food, they'll have more good food, and they'll have more of like a community kind of based feeling that it kind of comes with food locally, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well,
food
that's true.
And there could be a lot of options for that, but I think that's going to be a vital thing for these 15-minute cities and town centers, you know.
Basically, you know, you're right. If they would make allotments for at least greenhouse areas or parks, so that you have a dual park, and maybe agricultural centers, or just keep some of the farms within there, because I think that would be great for, you know, not just for growing stuff and for food, but also for people to go and visit stuff, and, you know, something for them to do and check out let's go check out the farm and the animals and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think you probably need to, right, you have some of these dispersed as you sprawl out and create these 15-minute cities or town centers. Like making the proper, some of the negatives that we have to avoid are we already mentioned, but making the proper infrastructure so that transportation isn't a problem. Okay. Number 2 is, like you're saying, not having food deserts and things. You need to have agriculture around nearby somewhere. The third one I heard was that, you know, they have a tendency to restrict people's freedoms. You know, in the sense of, hey, if you happen to need a car, it may be hard to own a car in a 15-minute you have to have a permit and fees and taxes or whatever, and so it's kind of hard to do that. I think we may not be that far advanced in like getting rid of all cars yet, right? So I think we need to sort of be careful how we do that, so that people that still need to go out and travel to visit their mom somewhere outside of town, you know, and in the old recreational homes and stuff like that, that they'd be able to do that. And so there's still that sort of worry from some people that that might be a negative, not a plus. But also give incentives to businesses so that they establish, you know, grocery stores and department stores and restaurants and
gyms,
you know, gyms and all those, hospitals, all those kind of things that you want. So you say, hey, we'll give you a tax break, we'll do this, we'll do that. That's what the towns need to think about doing. The other thing about in the rural areas, as you mentioned, that is not the town center concept, is that they just seem to be putting up a lot of government housing way out in the rural areas. And they just sort of like build a bunch of these low cost housing, you know, like apartments, and just, you know, stick a bunch of people out there. And then they have no jobs and stuff out there. Some of these rural, like, so all these people have nothing, and they're always going to be maybe on government assistance because there's no way for them to work in these areas because there's just not enough opportunity. So if you have thousands and thousands of people out in these areas with no opportunity for them, that's sort of backwards. It's like, you know, one way you're talking about you have a business and you put housing around it, but no other infrastructure. Other thing is you put a bunch of people out there, but no business, and that's just as bad because they have nothing to do, or no place to work. So that's not really a good town center or 15-minute concept either.
Well, I was going to say in one of our earlier videos, we were talking about the Chip and Science Act. So actually in the Phoenix area, there's going to be a big opportunity to have, or even in our area, to have more semiconductor companies that build or for solar panels and stuff,
Right.
and all that. The
It's a
silicon
huge
chips.
complex. I mean,
It's going to be a big business. So if they do that, they really need to think about these 15-minute cities or town center concepts to kind of
that'd be a great place to do one.
to
right there.
accommodate
Yeah.
all these big, huge businesses that are going to come up due to the millions of dollars that will be available for for
Right.
making these semiconductors and stuff.
Well, there's that, and then I've heard of the thing we mentioned. There's something called a sustainable community or sustainable cities. Is that something that's the same thing as what we're talking about?
It's a little different. The emphasis on that is that it's a more all-inclusive concept. So it is mainly with the mind to help with climate change, but it's also in the mindset to help those that are disadvantaged, or those that have disabilities, or those for poor or older people, that they have mobility and access to all the amenities and different places, public places that they can go. Well, not only that, they want there to be all-inclusive for housing, so everybody has affordable housing, things like that.
So also accessibility for like handicapped and things like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
handicap. So you might have a situation where you're talking about where you said where our mom lives, where you just put up government housing. I mean, that'll solve the all-inclusive stuff for people to live in and all that, and maybe some other things. But will they have something to do, or I mean, are they going to be able
Yeah.
to have the quality of life that they want to?
All right, so I guess we'll sign off now. We're the Climate Change Brothers, talking about agriculture and energy and all things about
Related to climate change.
related to climate change.